close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath. Can you smell the warm, dusty pavement of a summer afternoon? Can you hear the sharp metallic pop of a glass soda bottle opening, followed by the tinny, crackling sound of a radio echoing across the courtyard? Welcome back to a time when life moved at a completely different pace. Today, we are traveling back to the Hungary of the 1970s and 1980s. We are going to explore 20 everyday rituals that were absolutely normal to us back then, but might seem completely absurd to anyone growing up today. These were the little habits, the unspoken rules, and the shared experiences that made our childhood so incredibly special. Stay with me until the very end, because our final memory involves a certain little bear and a toothbrush, a nightly ritual that I promise will bring a warm tear of nostalgia to your eye. So, pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let us remember together. Before we dive into our memories, let us set the stage. Time itself felt different back then. It was heavier, slower, and much more deliberate. We did not have the entire world in the palms of our hands, glowing on a little glass screen. Instead, our world was our neighborhood, our apartment building, and our family living room. Waiting was a natural part of existence. We waited for the bus, we waited in line for groceries, and we waited for our favorite song to play on the radio. But that waiting was never empty. It was filled with conversation, with observation, and with anticipation. People often look back and think that because we had fewer material things, our lives were somehow poorer. But anyone who lived through those decades knows the exact opposite is true. Our emotional lives were profoundly rich. Our connections were genuine. We relied on each other, we talked face to face, and we found immense joy in the smallest of triumphs. We knew the true value of things because everything required a little bit of effort. Let us explore exactly what that beautiful, effort-filled life looked like. Let us begin with a ritual that sounds like a punishment today, but was actually a blessing. The television-free Monday. In the 1970s, the national broadcast simply shut down on the first day of the week. There was no scrolling, no channel surfing, just a blank, quiet screen sitting in the corner of the living room. Families had to find other ways to fill the evening hours. Fathers would spread out the newspaper on the kitchen table. Mothers might take out their knitting or the sewing machine, its rhythmic clicking providing a comforting soundtrack. We children would sit on the rug, playing cards, maybe a game of Macau, or reading thick, leather-bound novels. The silence forced us to talk to one another. The living room buzzed with the gentle hum of human voices, laughter, and the clinking of teacups. It was a weekly reset button, a forced pause that brought families together in a way that modern technology has completely erased. We did not feel deprived of entertainment. We felt present with our loved ones. And now, let us remember the ritual of the Sunday lunch. It was not just a meal, it was a sacred weekly institution. The preparations began early in the morning. By 10 o'clock, the entire apartment block smelled of simmering meat soup, the famous huslevis, slowly bubbling on the stove with golden circles of fat floating on top. Then came the rhythmic, echoing sound of meat being pounded on a wooden board. Every mother in the building was preparing the breaded meat, the rantot hus. Exactly at noon, a very specific ritual took place. The radio was switched on to the Közért station, and the traditional program called A Song for a Good Lunch began to play. The sweet, melancholic strains of Hungarian folk music filled the kitchen. We sat at a table covered in a white lace tablecloth. You could not rush this meal. You had to eat the hot soup with thin vermicelli noodles, followed by the crispy meat and pickled cucumbers. It was a sensory symphony of smells, sounds, and tastes that defined our weekends and grounded our families. Let us step outside and remember the sticky, sweet glory of the Bambi drink. Long before global cola brands dominated the shelves, we had our own unique refreshments. Bambi was an orange-flavored, highly carbonated beverage that came in a distinct, textured glass bottle. The ritual of drinking it was usually tied to a hot summer day at the local Lido or a small outdoor buffet. The vendor would open the metal cap with a sharp snap. You had to drink it quickly before the bees found you because it was incredibly sugary. The taste was somewhat synthetic, a strong, almost biting orange flavor that left your lips sticky. But to us, it was the taste of pure freedom and summer holidays. Returning the thick glass bottle for a small deposit was part of the magic, teaching us the value of recycling long before it became a global trend. Today, artisanal sodas try to replicate that feeling, but nothing will ever compare to a cold Bambi on a scorching July afternoon by the water. Moving on, let us recall the weekend's car washing ceremonies. Owning a car, whether it was a rattling Trabant with its two-stroke engine, a boxy Lada, or a Wartburg, was a massive privilege. You waited years on a list just to get one, so when you finally had it, you treated it like a member of the family. On Saturday mornings, the courtyards of apartment buildings and the driveways of suburban houses became communal car washes. Fathers would bring out plastic buckets filled with soapy water and large sponges. Children were often tasked with scrubbing the hubcaps. The smell of cheap car shampoo mixed with the lingering scent of gasoline. People would chat over the hoods of their cars, smoking cigarettes and discussing football or politics. Washing the car was not a chore to get out of the way. It was a proud public display, a labor of love, and a fantastic excuse to socialize with your neighbors in the morning sunshine. Do you remember the ritual of shopping at the local grocery store, the Közért? It was nothing like the massive, sterile supermarkets of today. You walked in, and the first thing that hit you was the aroma. A giant red industrial coffee grinder stood near the entrance, and the smell of freshly roasted coffee beans was intoxicating. You picked up a heavy metal wire basket that left red indentations on your arm. The bread section was a sensory delight. Fresh, crescent-shaped rolls, the beloved kifli, sat in large wooden crates. We never bought bread in plastic bags. It was fresh, crusty, and smelled of yeast and warmth. The shop assistants wore crisp white coats and knew everyone by name. They would slice the cold cuts exactly to your liking, wrapping them tightly in thick white paper. Shopping was an intimate, local experience, where a trip to buy milk and bread meant catching up on the neighborhood gossip. Right now, let us delve into a childhood economy that seems utterly bizarre now, collecting and trading paper napkins. In the 1970s and 80s, every young girl, and secretly some boys, had a heavy album filled with colourful napkins. This was the Shalvetagütish. We did not use these napkins to wipe our mouths. That would have been a tragedy. We smoothed them out, categorized them by themes like animals, flowers, or cartoon characters, and stored them like precious gems. The schoolyard was the trading floor. A rare, scented napkin brought back from a trip to East Germany or Austria could be traded for 5 ordinary local ones. We would spend hours during recess negotiating, admiring the intricate patterns, and carefully transferring a newly acquired treasure into our books. It taught us negotiation, appreciation for small, beautiful things, and the joy of curating a collection that was uniquely our own. Let us talk about a dessert born out of pure necessity and imagination, the winter ice cream or telefagi. Real ice cream parlors closed their doors when the autumn leaves fell, but children still craved that magical cone. So, the food industry invented a brilliant, if slightly absurd, substitute. The winter ice cream was a regular wafer cone, but instead of frozen dairy, it was filled with a dense, overly sweet, buttery cocoa cream. The top was sealed with a hard chocolate coating. We would unwrap the shiny foil paper in the middle of January, our breath frosting in the cold air, and bite into that heavy, room-temperature chocolate cream. The cone was often a little stale and chewy, but we did not care. It was a comforting, sugary illusion that tricked our minds into feeling the joy of summer during the darkest, coldest days of the year. It was resourcefulness wrapped in shiny foil. Can you hear that noise? That violent, rhythmic shaking coming from the bathroom? That was the sound of washing day with a Haidu washing machine. Before automatic machines quietly did everything for us, doing laundry was a loud, steamy, physical event. The small cylindrical washing machine would aggressively agitate the clothes, vibrating so hard it would slowly walk across the wet bathroom floor. The room filled with thick steam and the sharp smell of boiling linen and strong detergent. When the washing cycle was done, the real work began. We had to use the hand-cranked wringer attached to the top, carefully feeding the wet, heavy sheets through the 2 rubber rollers. It took strength and coordination. Hanging the freshly wrung clothes on the balcony lines, feeling the stiff, clean fabric in the breeze gave you a profound sense of accomplishment. It was hard work, but the scent of that air-dried laundry is something modern chemicals can never replicate. Let us remember the intense dedication required to listen to our favorite music, taping songs from the radio. In the era before streaming, if you wanted to own a song, you had to catch it live. We would sit on the carpet next to our bulky cassette recorders, a blank tape loaded and ready. Our fingers hovered nervously over the record and play buttons simultaneously. We listened to Petofi Radio or Radio Free Europe, waiting for the DJ to introduce the latest pop hit. The absolute highest form of frustration was when the radio host continued to talk over the introductory guitar solo of a song. We would press record, hold our breath, and pray for silence. The resulting cassette tapes were a chaotic mix of fading signals, sudden static, and the chopped-off endings of songs. But we treasured those mixtapes. We hand-wrote the track lists on the paper inserts. Every single song was earned through patience and perfect timing. Now, imagine the streets filled with children hauling massive wooden carts. This was the glorious, chaotic ritual of the school paper collection, the papiergütes. Twice a year, schools organized these recycling drives, but it was not just about the environment. It was a fierce, passionate competition between classes. For weeks beforehand, we knocked on neighbors' doors asking for old newspapers and magazines. We tied them into heavy bundles with rough twine, our fingers turning black from the newsprint. On the day of the collection, we dragged these massive piles on makeshift carts through the neighborhood to the schoolyard. The smell of dusty, old paper filled the air. They weighed the bundles on a giant industrial scale. Winning the competition brought immense pride and usually a small prize, like a day off from classes or a chocolate bar. It taught us teamwork, hustle, and the value of turning useless clutter into a shared victory. Let us step back into the kitchen and admire a heavy, beautiful piece of equipment, the glass soda siphon. Before plastic bottles ruined the oceans, we made our own sparkling water at home. The heavy glass bottle was encased in a protective metal mesh. The ritual began at the grocery store, where we exchanged empty silver gas cartridges for full ones. Back home, you filled the siphon with cold tap water, screwed the top on tight, and inserted the metal cartridge. Then came the twist. With a loud, aggressive hiss, the carbon dioxide shot into the water. We loved shaking the heavy bottle to make it even fizzier. The resulting soda was sharp, with huge, biting bubbles that stung your throat in the best possible way. It was the essential ingredient for a summer fruit syrup drink, the syrup, or a refreshing wine spritzer for the adults. Making soda was a loud, mechanical, and deeply satisfying daily chore. When winter arrived, a very specific and ancient ritual took place in the countryside. The pig slaughter, or dísnovágás. This was not just about food, it was a profound communal event. It started in the freezing pitch-black dawn. Relatives and neighbours gathered, their breaths turning to thick white smoke in the frigid air. The first ritual was always drinking a shot of strong, homemade plum palinka to warm the blood. The day was a whirlwind of hard labour. The sharp smell of wood smoke, burning hair, roasted onions and sweet paprika filled the courtyard. Women washed the intestines to make sausages, while men broke down the meat. Children ran around, helping where they could, anticipating the feast of fresh roasted meat and liver later that evening. It was a messy, exhausting day, but it ensured the family had meat, fat and sausages for the entire winter. It was the ultimate display of rural self-reliance and deep community bonds. Let us travel to the shores of Lake Balaton in the middle of July. The sensory experience of a Hungarian summer holiday was defined by a few specific things. The smell of deep-fried dough, the langos, smothered in garlic, sour cream and cheese, the sight of colourful paddle boats on the murky green water, and the sound of the portable Soviet radio, the Sokol. Everyone seemed to have one. It came in a stiff brown leather case with a long, thin strap. You had to extend the telescopic antenna and turn the small plastic dial with the precision of a safecracker to find a clear frequency. The sound was tinny, lacking any bass, and frequently interrupted by static, but hearing the sports broadcast or the afternoon pop show crackling through that tiny speaker while lying on a plaid blanket under the shade of a weeping willow tree was absolute perfection. The Sokol radio was our soundtrack to freedom. Do you remember the morning ritual of tying the red pioneer tie, the uterönjakende? For children in the socialist era, being part of the pioneer youth movement was deeply ingrained in school life. Waking up on a day when we had to wear our uniforms meant a very specific routine. The crisp white shirt had to be flawless, but the most important element was the bright red fabric tie. Our mothers would carefully iron it, making sure there were no creases, tying it around the collar, slipping the ends through the small plastic toggle felt like putting on a badge of belonging. When we stood in the schoolyard for the morning assembly, breathing in the scent of floor wax wafting from the school corridors, seeing hundreds of other children wearing the exact same red tie, we felt a powerful sense of unity. Regardless of the politics of the time, for a child, that red fabric represented camaraderie, summer camps, and shared adventures. Let us walk the echoing concrete corridors of a typical 1970s block of flats, the Panelhaz. These massive buildings shaped a very unique social ritual. The acoustic transparency of the walls meant you always knew what your neighbours were doing, but this closeness bred a beautiful system of mutual reliance. If a mother was baking a cake on a Tuesday evening and realised she was out of flour, she did not put on her shoes and walk to the store. She simply walked down the hall in her slippers and knocked on the neighbour's door holding an empty teacup. Borrowing an egg, a pinch of salt, or some sugar was a daily occurrence. The door would open, the smell of someone else's dinner would drift out, and pleasantries were exchanged. This constant, informal borrowing created a tight-knit safety net. We lived in concrete boxes, but those boxes were connected by a web of shared resources and genuine neighbourly trust. Now, let us recall a fruit that was once considered a rare and exotic treasure, the banana, at Christmas time. Today, you can buy a bunch of bananas at any hour of the day, but in the socialist economy of the 1970s, tropical fruits were incredibly scarce. They only appeared in stores in December, just before the holidays. The ritual involved standing in a long, freezing queue in front of the greengrocer for hours, just to buy a strictly limited amount. When you finally got them, they were usually completely green and rock hard. We would take them home and place them on top of the highest kitchen cupboard, right next to the ceiling where the air was warmest. And then we waited. We watched them every day as the skins slowly turned yellow and eventually dotted with brown. Eating that single banana on Christmas Eve, savouring the sweet, mushy texture, was an event. It tasted like luxury. It tasted like a miracle. Think about the items we wore, the gear of our youth. Two iconic pieces defined our movement, the Tizzer shoes and the Kemping bicycle. The Tizzer shoes were heavy canvas sneakers with a thick rubber sole and the iconic T logo. Putting them on meant you were ready for action. They squeaked loudly on the polished wooden floors of the school gymnasium, and when we went outside, we rode the Kemping bike. This heavy, small-wheeled, foldable bicycle was practically indestructible. The ritual of riding it involved adjusting the long seat post with a heavy metal lever. The click of the coaster brake as you pedalled backward to stop is a sound permanently etched in our minds. We rode them to the store, to the lake, and around the neighbourhood until the streetlights came on. They were heavy and awkward by today's standards, but to us, the Tizzer shoes and the Kemping bike were the ultimate vehicles of teenage independence. Let us step into a rural kitchen in late June, where the air is thick, humid, and smells like heaven. The ritual of making homemade fruit syrup, the syrup. We did not buy artificial cordials in plastic bottles, we made them from scratch. We would spend hours picking wild raspberries in the woods or gathering elderflowers from the bushes along the dirt roads. Back in the kitchen, grandmothers would boil the fruit with mountains of sugar in massive, heavy red enamelled pots, the famous bonyhady pots. The sweet, sticky steam permeated the entire house. The most beautiful part of the ritual was sealing the heavy glass bottles. They poured the boiling syrup in and then covered the top with a piece of clear cellophane, snapping a tight rubber band around the neck to seal it. Opening one of those dusty bottles in the dead of winter, mixing the thick red syrup with bubbly soda water, was like drinking the captured essence of the summer sun. Consider the profound act of making a phone call. We are talking about the heavy, dark plastic rotary phone sitting on a small wooden table in the hallway. Making a call was a physical commitment. You picked up the heavy receiver, waiting for the long, steady dial tone. Then, you placed your finger in the hole for the first number, pulled the heavy plastic dial all the way to the metal stop, and let it spin back. The mechanical, rhythmic clicking sound of the rotary dial was incredibly satisfying. You had to do this for every single digit. Because the phone was wired to the wall in the hallway, there was no privacy. You had to sit on a little stool, whispering into the receiver while your family walked past. We memorized the phone numbers of all our friends and relatives. A phone call was expensive and intentional. We did not call to waste time. We called because we had something meaningful to say. And finally, we arrive at the most gentle, deeply ingrained ritual of our childhood evenings. The evening tale and the arrival of the TV Mackie, the television bear. Every single night, precisely at 8 o'clock, children across the entire country stopped whatever they were doing. The famous tinkling melody would start playing from the television set. The screen showed a clumsy, lovable little puppet bear. We watched as he set up his chair, turned on his own little television, and most importantly, we watched him brush his teeth with loud, gurgling sounds. That gurgling sound was the universal command for millions of children to go to the bathroom and squeeze the minty toothpaste onto their brushes. After the short cartoon played, the bear waved goodbye, and that was it. That was the absolute boundary of the day. No arguments, no begging for 5 more minutes. The TV Mackie had spoken. The day was over, the lights went out, and we drifted to sleep, safe in the rhythm of our predictable, beautiful world. As we look back at these 20 rituals, a profound realization washes over us. We realize that we are not simply missing the old objects. We are not longing for the heavy dial phones or the scratchy sounds of a cassette tape. What we are truly missing is the way we felt when we used them. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of our days. We miss the feeling of anticipation, the joy of waiting for a single banana to ripen or a favorite song to play on the radio. Most of all, we miss the undeniable connection to each other, the face-to-face conversations, and the comfort of knowing our neighbors. Those everyday routines wove the fabric of a society that, despite its challenges, was rich in humanity and warmth. Thank you for taking this beautiful journey down memory lane with me today. If these memories brought a smile to your face, please gently press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more nostalgic journeys. And now, I would love to hear from you. Which of these rituals resonated with you the most, or what was a unique routine in your own childhood home? Please leave your stories in the comments below. I cannot wait to read them. Until next time, take care and keep your memories alive.